Hey, welcome to another educational online programming of AAU Talks. I am your host, Rita Kusi. We have a very educational topic to discuss with you today, so thank you for tuning in. When we return, I will introduce you to today's special guest.
Why University of Ilorin?
I chose the University of Ilorin for a number of reasons. One of them is the fact that the university has a very conducive environment. It provides students with a proper academic environment.
I chose the University of Ilorin because of the good culture they try to imbibe in students in the aspect of improving their morals and also in the aspect of improving their dressing in terms of decency.
It feels good knowing that your 4 years is 4 years and your 5 years is 5 years. Unlike a number of schools in Nigeria where your 4 years course might last 5 years, 6 years, or even 7 years in some extreme cases. But University of Ilorin, better by far, your 4 years course is 4 years course. And it feels good knowing that after 4 years, I'll be rounding up my session. That's one of the things I really love about this university.
Welcome back to AAU Talks. I am your host, Rita Kusi, and today we are discussing lupus, an autoimmune disease that is affecting millions of women globally. And I'm joined by a special guest, Professor Judith Mills. I'm going to let Professor Judith Mills introduce herself to you all. Welcome.
Hello, Rita.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Glad to have you here.
To discuss lupus, and that it's affecting millions, as you mentioned, and primarily people of African descent, women of African descent, but also children and men as well.
Okay.
So it's a topic that needs to be a conversation piece for in a lot of homes because the symptoms mimic so many other illnesses.
Okay.
So
We're definitely going to get into the conversation today, the talk on lupus, because I do agree that it's something that it's an illness that we don't talk about enough.
Yes.
All right. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your title.
Oh, I'm a biomedical scientist and adjunct professor part-time. Teach college success seminar and also biology. And it's been a passion of mine to educate others about autoimmune diseases in general because we live in a world where everybody's afraid of cancer, HIV, and AIDS, but more people suffer from autoimmune illnesses in general than they do cancer and die from, cancer or HIV in general.
It's underrated. It's not something we talk about enough.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
And, there are many illnesses under the autoimmune family that, many suffer from, but they don't take it like a big deal, like the eczema or dermatitis. These are all similar symptoms that you get with lupus as well. So it's a very important topic.
Definitely.
That we should definitely, make it a conversation piece.
Okay. Now, I know you personally, and I've watched you, just advocate for lupus. I've watched you just carry on day to day.
Yeah.
So can you share more? I know what your struggles have been, but the viewers do not. So I just want you to give us some background about your personal experience with lupus.
Well, I was diagnosed at the age of 16, and in the prime, that's when it usually happens. Lupus is known to affect women during childbearing ages. So at the age of 16 is when I was diagnosed. But prior to the diagnosis, I was an active teenager. My nose is in everything, track and field, dancing. I was even doing beauty pageants at the time. So it's like I was very busy. And when the symptoms were, showing themselves, they associated with the fact that maybe I was stressed from, you know, being so active as a teenager, and, you know, kept saying, well, if it's fatigue, you need to
just rest
or give up track or give up dancing. You know, I kept giving the things up, but nothing was changing. I was still heavily fatigued, and my blood count was always low. I was always anemic, and it was like, oh, well, you need some iron pills. So the symptoms were there, and my mom was very, you know, attentive towards me. So she would constantly take me to the doctor when I say I'm not feeling well, where others were passing judgments like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, even the doctors would tell you, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just too active. You know? Yeah, because the lupus is very hard to diagnose. We call it the great imitator because it comes off as so many other illnesses. You know, the flu-like symptoms and the unexplained fevers. You know, someone would say, oh, it's probably malaria.
You can easily misconstrue it for different
Exactly. So, of course, in the U.S., they're not going to say malaria, but, you know, they will just associate with the fact that I'm overactive.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just kept going back and forth to the point where things drastically changed. I couldn't even walk up the stairs at school. And I'm like, how do you go from a track runner, a dancer, to not being able to walk upstairs at school? And that's when people actually noticed that I wasn't making it up, because you look like a picture of health. You look like a picture of health, so everybody, you know, it's hard for someone to believe, to tell them, oh, you know, I'm chronically ill, that I'm not feeling well all the time.
Exactly, especially at that age, because you're so young that no one expects anything to be wrong with you.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, it was heartbreaking and shocking to a lot of people, especially my coach. He literally cried because he had so much hopes for me as a track runner. Girl, I was trying to be like FloJo. I was getting there, and it was disappointing for him. And we all felt like whatever was going on with me, once a diagnosis had been given, you know, I can get back to my life. But that's when the journey began. I started running a different race, a race called life. It was no longer about track and field. It was about.
What point were you actually diagnosed? Like, how long did it actually take?
Well, it took 3 years, because I started feeling those symptoms of the fatigue and hair loss and anemia very early on. But, you know, again, they contributed to the fact that, you know, I was so active, I was stressed. You know, I was a stressed teenager, so giving up. Each time they said something, I gave up something. To the point where I'm like, okay, so now you've robbed me of my daily activity, and I'm still feeling the same way. Something is definitely going on. That's not right. So we didn't just take the no as an answer. We just kept going back, keep going back, because that's what people have to do. Sometimes when you get that diagnosis from the doctor saying, oh, it's just stress, or there's nothing really wrong with you. You need a second, third, fourth opinion, even. You don't stop until you get an answer.
Wow. So what were some of the symptoms that you started feeling within those 3 years? Like, what, can you share some with our viewers?
Extreme fatigue, loss of appetite. Even now, I still struggle with that. You know, a loss of appetite, the hair loss, the anemia, a low red blood count where constantly you're always cold. Even in the summertime, you're just cold for no reason. So those are the type of symptoms I experience. But lupus is different for everyone. Because I've known people who have seizures or mild strokes or chest pains from lupus, or headaches. I didn't get those symptoms. It's different for everyone. This is why it's also very hard to diagnose.
What has been some of your struggles since you became diagnosed with lupus?
Well, I would say lupus took everything that was normal away from me, and I just had to learn new things and just redirect my life, because it just took everything that I knew without even saying sorry. It just took it away. Just robbed me. like waking up in the morning to an empty house.
Exactly. It's like your life has just drastically changed.
Exactly. And it was hard to take in. It was hard to take in at first, especially because amongst your peers, they expect certain things from you. They expect you to be active. They expect you to hang out. And I have a bedtime. You know, people are like, how old are you that you're sleeping at 9 o'clock at night and things like that.
But they don't
so you have, you know, you go through that with people and they will never understand. That's one thing that I've learned along my journey. People will never understand, no matter how much you tell them, or no matter how many times that they deal with you on a regular basis, they will never understand.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now I've known you for several years, and I know that you're a huge health advocate.
Yeah.
You know, since meeting you in Jersey, New York, and then now, and I know that you've been coming to Ghana for for several years now to raise awareness. So what led you to become an advocate, a health advocate?
Well, I would say it this way. When the symptoms started, when I got my diagnosis, the first thing that came to mind is, am I the only one in the family that has this illness? Because out of 12 children, I don't know any of my siblings to have these type of symptoms.
So it's not hereditary?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So I didn't get any answers. But as the years went on, through my advocacy, other family members, because Mill's family is where we're a big family, and there's a lot of people that I don't know who probably know of me, because I left Ghana at a very young age. So through a television show, awareness that I was doing in Ghana, someone alerted a niece of mine that I have never met, who was actually in the US, who was also dealing with lupus. So then I said, haha, so there is a family link. And then another family member also told me there was another family member in the UK who actually dealt with lupus as well. So then I said, here we go. In our families, especially the African families, when illnesses are going on, people hide it. And that's the mistake that we make. So see, had we known in the beginning, maybe my mom could have said to them, hey, we know that autoimmune illnesses run in the family, so could you check for different types of autoimmune diseases to see if that is what's affecting my daughter. So it is important. It's very important for people to talk about illnesses in the family, because every time we went to the doctor, they always asked, is it something that's, because lupus is not always hereditary. Sometimes it can onset because of stress or whatever tragedies in life or anything, because we really can't pinpoint as scientists and researchers, this is what caused lupus. But we know that stress is a factor. We know that environmental causes is a factor. And a family history of autoimmune diseases, not just lupus. Because I would say 9 times out of 10 people who suffer from lupus have a family history of other autoimmune illnesses like arthritis or gout or eczema. All these things are autoimmune illnesses.
Okay. And we don't just, you know, just to add on to what you said, we hide it, I guess, because it's, to some, it may be shameful, but then we also like to blame it on external factors when we are feeling a certain way.
Yes, oh girl, you know, I got my prayers.
Yeah,
I
did.
Like,
oh, somebody's doing this to me.
Exactly.
You know, it's like we don't want to acknowledge it for what it truly is, and before you know it,
and that's why this is why I chose to do my my advocacy in Ghana, besides the U.S., is that we have this mentality that when you're sick and the doctors haven't given you an answer, it's witchcraft. That's the first thing that comes. So you'll get your holy water, your prayers and things like that.
Someone is doing it to me when it's...
Exactly, and you don't follow up with the doctors. But you know, I come from a educated family, so we didn't go that route. I did get my prayers and things, but we also seek medical assistance, which is what I always advocate here in Ghana, that if these symptoms of unexplained fevers or headaches, chest pain, fatigue. It's happening, and you keep going to the doctor, and they're probably, you know, saying it's malaria. Maybe they need to check for lupus. And that's for those who can afford to get physicians' help. There are some people who the economy doesn't allow that for them here in Ghana, so they end up in the church homes.
Wow.
And some die from that, or you know, they'll go to a homeopath, which is a good idea, but sometimes they don't know the right dosage of some of these herbs that they're being given. So it all takes a lot of education, and this is why I chose Ghana, because I cannot forget where I came from. And I felt like it was my duty to come back and educate my people, because we're not talking about a disease that it's contagious. If a person can sit there and say, oh, I have malaria, or I have typhoid fever, or cholera, or any of these communicable diseases that we know to be, you know, prime here in Ghana.
Exactly. That's what
is the big deal about, you know, saying that my body's attacking itself and I suffer from lupus? It's just like saying I have arthritis.
Exactly.
Because this is your body, you are at war with your own body. Your body's attacking itself. You cannot touch somebody or sneeze on somebody and they get the illness. No, it's just something that is internal. So it's very important to, you know, talk about it, and the people that are here who are suffering from it, to get rid of that stigma, because I've met a lot of patients who don't want to say, oh, I've been diagnosed with lupus. What is the stigma? There shouldn't be a stigma behind the fact that you're suffering from an illness, whatever the illness is, whether it's lupus, HIV, whatever you're going through, or cancer.
Especially
you have to talk about it.
You can help the next person.
Talking about it, exactly. Talking about it brings solutions. If you don't talk about it, there's no solution. This is why in our families, when diseases are prominent, nobody really knows what's in the family, because everybody keeps everything in their back pocket, or sit on it, or sweep it under the rug.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. And I mean, I guess it's not that I want to commend you, because I'm sure you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do, you know, which is to make sure that others are aware of the autoimmune disease. So how can you, I guess I just want you to talk about lupus now. How are you dealing with it? Is there a cure? Are you seeking treatments? Like, how are you dealing with?
So my doctors would say the type of lupus I have is not your average lupus patient, because lupus attacks my white cell counts, which means that the average person whose white cell counts, it's like 11 or 12. That's normal for, you know, the average person. But for me, it attacks my white cells, where my white cells becomes very low. Like right now that I'm sitting, I'm like a 2.5, and that's after a Neupogen injection. On a regular, it's like 1.2. So it makes me very susceptible to infections. So I hate being in areas where there's a lot of people and there's no ventilation, because as soon as a sneeze, as long as it's not allergies, but if it's like a cold,
you can catch it.
I'll catch it just like that.
Wow.
And it's the same thing where, like, I'm in a plane, I have to wear a mask. I remember I was sitting to a young man, and he was like, am I contagious? Really? Or is he...
because you had the mask
because I had the mask, or am I protecting myself from him? And I was like, you're right. I'm protecting myself from you, because I'm in a plane and there's not a lot of ventilation here. You hear a lot of coughing and sneezing. If I don't wear this mask, by the time I get off this plane, I will be sick.
Wow.
So he was right away just interested to know, like, you know, what was wrong with me. And I was like, oh, it's lupus. And I explained to him what lupus was, and you know, how it affects me on a daily basis. And he was just so in tune and so curious because he's never heard of such an illness before.
Okay.
Which led him to kind of follow up and come to the TED Talk that I was doing when I first arrived, because he said he wanted to know what exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to talk more about lupus to make sure that you all know what it is and how you can tell if you're diagnosed with the autoimmune illness. We'll be right back.
What do you think about when you think of success?
Success is about hard work. Success is about knowledge and applying it for the good of the community. Success is about skills development. It's about creating innovative ideas and building a hope and making it a reality. Success is about having big dreams and chasing them. Success is nurtured here. We as National University of Science and Technology stand as the only key you can use to unlock doors for success. When you think of success, think in other terms.
Welcome back. I am your host of AAU Talks, Rita Kusi, and today I'm joined with Professor Judith Mills, and we are discussing lupus, which is an autoimmune illness that affects millions of people from all over the world. Now, the conversation, it's been very educational. It's been very educational. Let's talk pop culture, because lupus has been in the news quite frequently. Can you name some of maybe the artists or, you know, people that are well known who are also dealing with lupus out in the open?
Yeah, I mean, I believe more celebrities are dealing with lupus. They just don't come out to say it because it's liability. So because people know that lupus patients suffer from a lot of fatigue and they get sick often and things like that. So a lot of celebrities wouldn't come out right away to say, oh, it's lupus, because they don't want that liability recognition on them that, oh, well, if, you know, I'm a singer and I come out and say I have lupus, that means I'm going to cancel tours. So a lot of people don't really want to mix business with that. But the few that have come out are Seal. He was known for that song, Kiss from a Rose.
It's actually my favorite song.
Yes, I mean, was also married to Heidi Klum at a point. He has lupus. A lot of people ask, oh, so, you know, they think that his face is, whether it's tribal marks or he's been in an accident. That's lupus when it gets aggressive, because lupus is an autoimmune disease that tends to attack any organs when it's aggressive. And our skin is the biggest organ. So that's what happened when his lupus was in a flare, and now he has been scarred. Because it's very, not only is it debilitating, but it's very disfiguring when it attacks your skin.
Wow.
Another celebrity that was known to have lupus was Michael Jackson. There were a lot of pictures that would show the butterfly rash, which is one of the markers where doctors easily can tell it's lupus. You get rashes on your cheekbones, and that's what they call the butterfly rash.
Okay.
So he was known to have that a lot, and you can see it in a lot of pictures. If you Google Michael Jackson and lupus, a lot of the cheekbones just red and flared up.
Wow.
Another celebrity who has come out has been Toni Braxton. Lupus was literally breaking her heart. Everybody wanted to know what was behind that song, Unbreak My Heart. Wow. It was really because it attacked her precarditis. Wow. So it attacked her by her heart, you know, where her chest wall. So, you know, that's where, you know, the history of that was. There's also been Nick Cannon, who it affected his kidneys.
Wow.
And he's been very vocal about it, especially with the Lupus Foundation of America. Selena Gomez recently was in the news because she got a new kidney because lupus, you know, aggressively, she got lupus nephritis, so she needed a transplant.
Wow.
So those are some of the celebrities. Lady Gaga has been borderline, which means you can get a lot of the symptoms but haven't really been diagnosed because there's not one specific test out there that says a person has lupus. Doctors are looking at the symptoms and following up with the blood work to determine, because it's the great imitator. It's the great imitator.
And the reason why I asked this question is because I wanted to prove the point that it can happen to anyone.
Exactly.
All these people that you've mentioned are, in terms of like age, in terms of like ethnicity, background, they are completely different.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so it can, lupus, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
Now, let's bring it to the continent.
Yeah.
Let's bring it to the continent. You and I today are wearing our bracelets.
Yes.
Because for 5 years, I've also been an advocate for lupus.
Right behind me, cheering me on.
Definitely, you know, because I see firsthand, you know, what you deal with, and I see that you're so full of life, you know, and I love that about you, and to see you going through some of these struggles, you know, it's the least I can do is, of course, support. So let's talk about the continent. You've been coming here for quite some time, doing some work here. Tell us how that's going. Have you met anyone here that is dealing with lupus?
I've been an advocate in the U.S. since I was diagnosed. I started my advocacy journey at Montclair State University, where I decided to get the school involved to walk for lupus, because I was a part of a leadership group, HRLDA, and we did things like heart walks, adapt a highway. We did a lot of community service. And during that time, I was also going through my own struggles, where my peers at college wanted to know why I didn't hang out with them, or, you know, why I was always in my room and why I'm always saying I'm tired. So I said to myself, the best way to explain to these people is, you know, get HRLD involved in a lupus walk, and then they'll get to understand what lupus is and why my behavior is the way it is. Not that I'm, you know, I'm an old grandma or something. Yeah, you know, and I'm having my mood swings and things like that, so that they can learn exactly what I'm going through. So through that, I got featured in the Herald News and a Record in Montclair, and they were like, oh wow. And I had people contacting me while I was living on campus, to the point where the former president of the Lupus Foundation came to the school just to have a conversation with me and say, you know, great job, you know, doing this, because lupus needs to be spoken about, you know, because he lost his daughter to lupus. And I was like, oh, you know, thank you. And it was through there I also organized a group on campus for other people suffering from autoimmune diseases in general, sort of like a support group, you know, because when you're going to college, you go through, it's a journey that the average person would understand. What I mean by that, you have classes and you got to wake up at a certain time. You have times where you need to get papers done, you know, assignments finished. And when you have lupus, your teachers need to know. They need to know this is what you're going through. So with that particular group, I explained to any patient who was dealing with any chronic illness, let your professors know.
Of course.
So that you can be excused for, you know, late assignments and things of that nature, so you can get through college a little bit easier.
It doesn't affect your grades.
Exactly, you know. So, you know, that's what that group was about. And, you know, I kept pushing, and he became like a father to me, where, you know, he was teaching me the ropes, and he said, there's another organization that I want you to join, which was at the time Lupus Alliance for Lupus Research, which is now Lupus Research Alliance. And it was like, you know, go. Woody Johnson started that foundation. You're into biology and you want to do research. I think that would be a great organization for you to join. So I did, and I became a committee member and also one of the speakers for Lupus Research Alliance, and kept building and getting the training of advocacy. While I was doing that, I also was hearing that other patients in Ghana was getting diagnosed. So it became an interest of mine to find out how they're coping here. Are they getting enough education? What is the country doing about it? And, you know, when I came, my heart was broken.
Why?
My heart was broken because I saw patients that were going through hell. Because one, the resources are not here, and there's not enough doctors. It takes specialists to diagnose lupus, dermatologists and rheumatologists. So the doctor, the resources is limited here. The doctors are limited. So I was just burdened. And you know, as human beings, the first thing that we are supposed to be is of service. So I was like, you know, how can I change the situation? How can I help the situation? So I became on a quest for statistics, because in order for Ghana to get funding, we need stats.
Of course, yeah.
And it's been a struggle, but God is so good that I can say that this year we finally made a step, you know, towards the future in a quest for statistics.
Talk about some of the struggles, because I mean, I know firsthand that coming across stats is just really challenging on this continent.
Yeah,
you know? So
they don't keep it.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the challenges that you faced and how maybe you wish it would have, how could it have been easier to help you, you know, further the awareness that you're hoping to create.
When I first came, I did a few TV interviews. I still do those, and radio, just talking about lupus in general, and you know, talking about the symptoms, and have people who are listening, if these symptoms sounds familiar, if you've been going to the doctor and you've been having unexplained fevers and you can't really get any answer, ask them to check if it's lupus. While I was doing that, I was also on a quest for statistics. I went to Kolebu, dead end. I went to SNIT, dead end, and I was introduced to Professor Daly of Rabito Clinic. And he was so excited to see me. He's become like a father to me. And he said, oh my God, it's about time, because I've been treating a lot of skin conditions with lupus patients here for years, from Accra to Ho, the north. He mentioned all of them. And I was like, I'm on a quest for statistics. And he said, you know, I'll do my best to help you, but we need national numbers. So it's been back and forth between the Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Services. All these years I come, and finally, I had a meeting the other day with Director General, and he passed me on to Dr. Kuku and Dr. Afuso, and they are putting in a plan to send a letter out to the public hospitals, the private hospitals and clinics, so we can finally tally up numbers for Ghana.
Good.
So
good.
All that hard work. Oh, so there were times I just wanted to just pull my eyebrows out.
I can imagine.
Because it was just so difficult, and I'm like, I'm here, I'm trying to help. I don't have to, because I'm in a country where resources are easy for me to assess, but my heart couldn't take the fact that somebody else in my condition didn't have the help that I have. So I was like, I definitely have to do something about it.
And
but it's been difficult.
All this way, even in your condition,
it's so difficult.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, this trip alone, I've been going through so much on this trip. I mean, I was even just telling my cousin this morning. I was like, I don't even think I want to do any more shows after today, because I'm tired. And all the different surgeries I've had, I've developed sciatica and I've developed tendinitis. So at the end of the night, I'm barely moving.
Of course, yeah.
So it's been difficult, but I'm still pushing forward, because I know this has to be done. Because it's never been about me. It's about others getting the help that they need. And that's why I do what I do, because at the end of the day, when you're focusing on helping others, whatever you're going through no longer becomes an issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I constantly share my story, because I want the next person to know that you're not alone, that somebody else out there is dealing with what you're dealing with. And you shouldn't live by stigma, but rather be vocal. Not because people will understand what you're going through, but at least they can show some type of compassion or sympathize with you.
Exactly. It's like what you did in university. Had
you
not come out to say anything. People would have speculated.
Yeah, because people were having a hard time with
Exactly.
me. They were even calling me Mother
Of
Teresa. You know,
Exactly.
you know, your peers are your biggest critics.
Yes.
They're calling me Mother
It's
Teresa.
true.
You never want to do anything,
It's
you know,
true.
type of thing. But I knew who I was. I know how much my body can take, and I knew I can't be the average person. So I make that very known. I'm sorry, I need to cancel on you. That's just who I am. Don't take offense to it. It's something that I'm dealing with, not you.
Yeah. And I'm sure those who know what you're dealing with understand, you know, so it's not...
Not necessarily. I would say besides my peers, I tend to deal with a lot of family members who don't understand. And it becomes an issue, or they'll take it personal.
Interesting.
Yeah, they'll take it personal because they're not understanding exactly what you're going through, and they go off a tangent that if you're feeling good today, then tomorrow you should be the same. As soon as you tell them, oh, I'm not feeling well, oh, you're sick again, like, you know, it's very, it gets very frustrating. And I tend to shy away from family members or friends that behave like that.
Because they don't understand, and they're not trying to understand.
They're not trying to understand, because I keep saying every day is not the same. I can have a good day today, but the next day I want to be in bed.
The same.
And another thing with, you know, patients who suffer from any type of autoimmune disease, you know, the fatigue level is so much that if you have a great day today, say I was able to knock out 3 or 4 things and get it done, I'll pay for it in like about 3 days. It will take me about 3-day resting period just for me to bounce back from that one day where I was able to accomplish so much. So people just do not understand. But all I ask is for you to cope with me.
Exactly.
Just cope with me.
I'm glad to hear that you're making headway here in Ghana.
Yeah.
So, like, what networks, what have you been able to, what do you think is different from this trip than the last trip? Because the last trip, I know it was frustration trying to connect with the right people.
Every trip has been challenging. Every trip has been challenging, but a learning experience. And last year, what made this trip a little different from last year is last year I had a conversation with Sangoon Daly, and he was like, Judith, you're doing the awareness. You know, you're on radio, you're on TV. Push towards the statistics. Push towards, and he was like, instead of, you know, leaning on the Ministry of Health and trying to go through them, go through Ghana Health Services. And that was the game changer.
Good.
So that became my focus and kept the conversation going. Even after I left the country, the constant emails, the phone calls, back and forth, until I came back, and now finally a step towards, you know, the right direction.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally. So who are some of the people that you can say now are helping you to move things along?
Well, as I mentioned, Professor Edmund Daly, Dr. Day has also been of help. When I was having the meeting with the U.S. Ambassador, Robert Jackson, I called them along so they can also explain to him the frustration. And he commended me for what I was doing because I don't have to. Again, I'm in the U.S. where resources are not limited in any shape or form. And, you know, he wanted to help, but how can he help without numbers? We believe in numbers, the statistics. So he was also invited USAID, Nora Mitch, and she also said the same thing. If we can get the numbers, then we can find out the way to best fund people here in Ghana, because as we are speaking, the National Health Insurance Scheme doesn't support the patients. And I took offense to it until recently I spoke to a former
lupus patients?
Yes. I was like, why, you know, because there's a great number here. Even though we haven't gotten the statistics with the patients and the histories of the patients that I've gotten to know, it's a great number here. We just need to be able to publish it. And I took offense to it. I was like, how can you guys support other illnesses and not lupus. And I had a conversation with former His Excellency Kufuor, and he explained to me, it's like, it's not that they've been excluded purposely. It's just that it's still struggling. It's still struggling. So now that we're moving a step forward into trying to find these statistics, once the statistics have been published, then we'll know the greater need that funding must be given to these patients.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. So strides have been made. I mean,
oh
strides have been made.
yeah.
I know it has not been easy. I
know
it has
no,
not,
and you know, I've had a few other supporters, especially GTV has been on my side from the beginning. TV3 has been on my side as well. There's been other shows like with Norte Dua. He's done interviews with me.
So the media has been supportive. The media has been supportive,
yes.
And now, of course, the Association of African
Exactly. Just the other day, I did a show with City FM.
Nice.
On TV, and you know, it's social service. It's social service. So you know, anytime I get a chance to get on any of these media platforms, I'm very grateful that, you know, they have taken upon, you know, to help me raise awareness here in Ghana.
Good, good. And I mean, it's great work that you're doing. It's great work. It's not been easy, and I like that you've not given up, because obviously it means a lot, and you'll get there. You know, you'll get there. So now we have come to the end of our program, and thank you so much for being on here and just sharing insights, you know, about lupus. Tell us, you have a nonprofit organization, so tell us how people can get involved, get in contact with you. You're also doing a fundraiser. How can people donate to that?
Yes, I started 2 nonprofits. The first one I started because of my background story, where living in the U.S., I mentioned resources, and at the age of 18, I was no longer able to get state insurance, which was Medicaid at that time, and I couldn't be under my mother's insurance. And I saw what she was going through financially, paying for my medications, until a family friend said, "Hey, there's resource centers. Even if you can't, you know, be under Medicaid, you know, look into that." And I went to those places, and I found out there was help out there. And I kept meeting more people who were also suffering from autoimmune illnesses generally, not just lupus, Crohn's. And they also were struggling with the same thing that I was. They got to a certain age that, you know, state insurance was no longer supporting them. This is in the era before Obamacare, or what we call Affordable Care Act. And learning about these resource centers, I realized that the big foundations also didn't know that these places existed. So that's where I said I needed to start a nonprofit organization so I can lead patients towards education, one, and also resources. Because what I've learned in my journey through lupus is that let your medicine be your food and your food be your medicine. What I mean by that is changing my lifestyle helped with a lot of the symptoms that I was getting. It helped for them to basically not just disappear, but they weren't ongoing like it was before, because I learned better ways of eating.
Okay, so like there are some natural
remedies
that you can use to help.
You know, I had my scientific background, but I also, you know, started doing my own research, saying, I realized when I ate things that had dairy, I didn't feel well. Or when I eat something that has yeast inside, so I stay away from breads. And, you know, so I also had to learn to stay away from some of our local foods, because kenke tend to have yeast. So, you know, I couldn't, I couldn't like quit it just, you know, just like that, you know, cold turkey. Once in a while you sneak it in, you know, but you know, I have to live. But it's not something you make your regular diet. So I started learning these things, and you know, I felt better. So anytime I had a conversation with a person who was also dealing with autoimmune, I was like, try to eliminate gluten, try to eliminate yeast, try to eliminate dairy, and see how you feel. And they always come back and say, I'm feeling better. So again, even though we don't know exactly what causes it, there are things that we can do, you know, to change the course of whatever that we're going through as far as, you know, autoimmune, because there are food triggers.
Interesting.
There are food triggers. Because I remember when I was having a conversation with one of my doctors, he was like, oh, you'll just be fine, eat regular. That's not true.
I can't eat regular.
No, because like I self-care before doctor's care.
Of course.
You know, you got to know yourself. You got to know exactly when Rita is not feeling well.
Of course.
You got to know when Rita eats fufu, she doesn't feel good. Once you learn those things about yourself, know your body, learn things to take out your diet, or what, all you have to, and I tell patients all the time, I said, all you have to do is eat your regular food, but start taking these things out and see how you feel. If you don't see any changes, go back to eating regular again. You basically have to do self-testing so that you can also help your doctors treat you. Exactly. You can't just go, oh, doctor, I'm sick.
Medicine.
It's
no,
not.
It's not. Just the medicine. It's what you.
It's lifestyle changes.
Yes.
You know, positive affirmations, and exactly. Like, oh, I'm going to get through this. Exactly. You know, mind, body, spirit. You have to do it all. It takes all that if you want to heal.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You know, I definitely appreciate, I mean, I think you're one of the strongest women I know. You know, you're so courageous, and it's just been a pleasure having you here and getting to hear your side of the story and letting, you know, educating our people on lupus, because yeah, you hear all the time about malaria, you know, when in some cases it may not be malaria. You know, so now hopefully if you've tuned in and you're watching, you have an idea what some of the symptoms are of lupus. So make sure that if you go to a doctor, get a second opinion, get a third opinion until they've narrowed down what the issue is. Again, today I have been your host, Rita Kusi, for AAU Talks, and I was joined by Professor Judith Mills. And thank you, our viewers, for tuning in.